Hello, this is Morale Bernard. In acknowledgement, recognition of Black History Month, I'm looking at the work of Carter G. Woodson and continuing. So, looking at self-help and labor among the freedmen, that's self-help and labor among the freedmen. And by the way, please subscribe to the channel. As ever, please subscribe to the channel and please share videos. Thank you very much. Okay. Were the Negroes there in such numbers and condition as to help themselves? South Carolina in 1860 had a white population of 291,000 plus people, a slave population of 402 plus people, and a free coloured population of 9,914 thereabout people. Having this large number of slaves, and that would be the 402 plus people, so having this large number of slaves, the dominant race, in its effort to maintain control, passed its police laws by which the evils of slavery existed there in their worst form. One of these laws was that of 1834, which made it a punishable offence to teach any slave to read and write. This law, however, was often violated, and free Negroes and even slaves attended school long enough to develop unusual power. After generations of oppression, the dawn of freedom brought with it a social upheaval. The freedmen now proceeded to taste the forbidden fruit, and the people who brought learning to them they received with open arms. The Yankee schoolmaster was not only to the freedmen a teacher, but his deliverer from bondage. Happily, in the enthusiasm of the late children of oppression, for learning they proved themselves to be not objects of charity, but actual supporters and promoters of the educational movement. It was a principle of some of these societies to open no new school unless a fair proportion of its expenses could be met by the parents of the pupils. There were made various arrangements by which the freedmen could help sustain the schools. In some instances, they boarded the teachers and met the incidental expenses of the school, while the societies paid the salaries and travelling expenses. In this way, nearly one half of the cost was sustained by them, and in some instances, nearly two-thirds of it. As the foregoing tables have helped to show in part, in some cases the freedmen met the entire expenses, bought the lot, erected the schoolhouse, and paid the salary of the teacher. During 1866, Tomlinson reported 5 houses had been built by them, and others were under the course of erection. They were located at the following places, and that's King's Tree, Darlington, Florence, Timmersville, Marion. During 1867, 23 schoolhouses were reported to have been built by the freedmen, aided by the Freedmen's Bureau and Northern Societies. For the support of school teachers this year, they contributed over $12,000. This, with $5,000 for schoolhouses, made an aggregate of $17,000 plus. The schoolhouses were placed in the hands of trustees selected from among themselves and were to be held permanently for school purposes. The means by which the freedmen offered their support was not always in cash, but in kind. During the early years following the war, there was a scarcity of money in circulation. The employers of the blacks, the planters, were themselves unable always to pay in cash. And as a substitute, a system of barter grew up, directing attention to this situation and the general question of self-help. Governor Andrews of Massachusetts, president of the New England Society, sent out the following circular to the freedmen of the South. The North must furnish money and teachers, the noblest of her sons and daughters, to teach your sons and daughters. We ask you to provide for them wherever possible, schoolhouses and subsistence. Every dollar you thus save us will help to send you another teacher. You can supply the teachers' homes with corn, eggs, chickens, milk, and many other necessary articles. Work an extra hour to sustain and promote your schools. The value of such labor averaged only about $8 a month. But Governor Andrews' recommendation was carried out in so many cases that much good was thereby accomplished. The campaign of education for the freedmen was temporary in character and was so regarded by the Freedmen's Bureau and the societies. It was merely an effort to place the ex-slaves on their own feet, and afterwards it was their task. In line with this policy, the Freedmen's Bureau and the military authorities seized every opportunity of instituting self-government among them, especially where they were congregated in large numbers. Such a case was Mitchellville. Sherman's Field Order 15 called for the laying aside of a vast stretch of territory exclusively for the freedmen. In the same manner, in 1864, the military officers at Hilton Head laid out a village for them near the officers' camps and introduced measures of self-government. The village was called Mitchellville in honor of General Ormsby Mitchell, who had been like a father to the multitude of 1,500 or more occupying the village. The place was regularly organized with a mayor and common council, marshal, recorder, and treasurer, all black, and all elected by Negroes, except the mayor and treasurer. Among the powers of the Common Council which concern us here was the compulsory provision that every child between the ages of 6 and 15 years shall attend school daily while they are in session, excepting only in cases of sickness, and the parents and guardians will be held responsible that said children so attend school, under the penalty of being punished at the discretion of the Council of Administration. We may or may not call this South Carolina's first compulsory school law. With a view to training teachers from among themselves, the Northern teachers seized every opportunity to pick out a bright student who would ultimately assume full responsibility. Accordingly, the schools were taught by persons of both races. In addition, those Negroes who already had some learning were pressed into service. This arrangement had its obvious disadvantages as well as advantages. The Negro teacher understood the environment and the character and nature of the pupils to a far greater extent than the Northern co-worker, but as could be expected, the native teacher was lacking in preparation. As one of the Northern journals expressed the situation, the men and women from the North carry much more than their education. They carry their race, moral training, their faculty, their character, influence of civilization, their ideas, sentiments, and principles that characterize Northern society. Occasionally, native white teachers were employed, but not always to the satisfaction of either the Yankee teachers or their pupils. Besides the regular organized schools that came under the control of the Freedmen's Bureau and these societies. The freedmen, in their eagerness to learn, opened what Avoid styles native schools, where some man or woman who had just learned to read and write a very little set about for the smallest pittance to teach his neighbour's children. Such teaching, though possibly arising from a commendable spirit, was a travesty on education. The white teachers characterize these native schools, so far as in any intelligent result goes, as worse than useless. They would rather receive their pupils totally ignorant than with the bad habits of reading, pronunciation, and spelling of these schools. However, there were among the Negro teachers a few who deserve special mention as showing signs of an endeavour to help the movement, and at the same time may serve as a test of the value of the commissionary movement by their northern friends. Some of the Negro teachers were from the north, as in the case of Charlotte S. Fortin, already mentioned. There was also Mrs. C M Hicks, who was sent south by the New York Society and supported by an auxiliary association in Albany. Her school was located at Anderson and contained nearly 200 pupils. After mentioning the good order and decorum of the school, the Anderson Intelligencer, a local white paper, says, "We were gratified with the proficiency and success attained and trust that they will persevere in their efforts to make better citizens and become worthy of the high privileges now granted to the race. This school is presided over by a coloured female, Mrs. Hicks. She is intelligent and capable and devotes all her energies to the school." At Greenville, there was Charles Hopkins, who taught a school for the support of which his white neighbours contributed $230. He bought at his own risk the building from the state arsenal and moved it 2 miles on a piece of ground which he had leased for 1 year. The school opened with about 200 scholars, among whom were boys and girls with rosy cheeks, blue eyes, and flaxen hair, though lately slaves, mingled with the black and brown faces. A visitor characterized the school of having good order, rapid progress in learning, and a great deal more. After supporting the school as long as possible, Hopkins was relieved by the Freedmen's Bureau, which assumed the responsibility he had incurred, and he was further aided by the accession of 3 additional teachers. His salary was contributed by the New York branch. Frank Carton at Camden was making similar efforts during this period. Down on Milton Hill at Mitchellville, in connection with the Port Royal experiment, there was Lamas Anders, a full-blooded African, who prior to the coming of the northern teachers was unable to read and write. Although 50 years old and having a family, he managed to learn to read by having one of the teachers give him lessons at night and at odd intervals. He was enterprising, and after only a year or 2 had managed to save $400 or $500. He bought land at the tax sales, and in the efforts of his people at Mitchellville to have churches and schools, he succeeded in erecting a church and a schoolhouse with help from the whites and Negroes. The building cost nearly $350, and in time there was added a teacher's home. The school was taught by ladies from Northampton, Massachusetts, who always had the cooperation and assistance of Anders. They characterized him as a black Yankee, not very moral or scrupulous, but a man who led all the others of his race in enterprise and ambition. Nell Lloyd White, who had picked up clandestinely a knowledge of reading while still a slave, was an assistant to 2 ladies at St. Helena, who had a school of 92 pupils made up largely of refugees from a neighbouring island. Likewise, engaged was Uncle Cyrus, a man of 70, who in company with one Ned assembled 150 children in 2 schools and taught them the best they could until teachers were provided by the relief societies. The brightest light among the Negro teachers was L Cardoza. He was a native of Charleston and received his primary and common school education there under the instruction of the free Negroes of the city. Being unable at his own expense to pursue his studies at home as far as he desired, he attended the University of Glasgow. He returned to Charleston and became a leader in the educational affairs of the city immediately at the close of the war. He was employed by the American Missionary Association and became principal of the Saxton School, later known as Avery Institute. In conformity with his classical training, he offered his advanced pupils languages, and in time they were ready for Howard University in Washington. There were some 4,000 children in the city of school age. Seeing the need of a permanent graded school system supported by public taxation, he used his influence to bring about this result. With regard to his project, Governor Orr said, "I heartily approve of the scheme of Mr. Cardoza to educate thoroughly the colored children of Charleston. I'm satisfied he will devote himself to the work earnestly and faithfully and merits, and should receive the confidence of the public in his laudable undertaking." Other public officials spoke in the same vein. One of the Northern teachers said of him, "He is the right man in the right place, and I am very thankful that it has fallen my lot to be placed under him." Join me for more as we proceed with Black History Month. Join me for more videos about Black history. Yes, Black History USA. So join me, Morale Bernard, for the next video. I'll see you then. Take care for now.